Pam Salem, a certified PEAT processor in the spiritual technologies of Zivorad Slavinski. Now, it's a reasonable question. What is PEAT? PEAT is an acronym for Prime Energy Activation and Transcendence. Okay, so we just sort of shortened that to PEAT. And Pam Salem is a certified PEAT processor. In addition to her work with PEAT, she offers equine experiential programs for personal growth, taught, quote unquote, by horses at the Horizon Farm in Seymour, Tennessee. She is an equine assisted training specialist with 40 years of horse experience who raised Arabian and Anglo Arabian sport horses for 20 years. Pam has co facilitated equine assisted programs since 2000 and currently co facilitates an equine experiential program at English Mountain Recovery Center near Sevierville, Tennessee. And I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, Sevierville, Tennessee. But these programs, her horse programs, in addition to the peat processing, her equine programs are unmounted programs, meaning you don't have to be riding around all over the place in order to reap the benefit of the therapy. They're unmounted programs. They consist of activities with the horses that can increase your awareness of body language and other sorts of nonverbal behaviors. And it also assists with something called kinesthetic learning that can lead to life-enhancing empowerment. And plus, I think we can all admit it's just lovely to be with horses in nature while you're discovering yourself on a deeper level. So if you'd like more information about Pam Salem, you can find her at pamsalem.com. But of course, tonight's topic won't be restricted solely to horses. Human beings can definitely benefit from peat processing as well. And tonight we're going to have Pam to talk to us about horses and about peat processing in human beings. So we're trying to get Pam on the line now. Are you with us yet, Pam?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, how nice, how nice. Well, before we get started on the interview, would you mind? I tried to define peat. I think you could probably do a better job. Would you mind sort of defining what it is for us, please?
PEAT is it sprang out of energy psychology, okay? And it was developed in 1999 by Zivorad Slavinski of Serbia. And it has its roots in various systems of energy psychology. He had studied it for years, and shortly after he did this, he made the breakthrough to effectively solve hardcore problems. Basically, your fundamental life problem. That's what PEAT addresses. Deep PEAT is the crown jewel of Zivorad's spiritual technology system. And it was my first experience with his work. And I was taken there actually through a horse workshop, and a gentleman did a process with us. And it was so profound that I went back to do the deep PEAT process. And what that is that you're born into this plane of existence, this plane of duality, and the primes are the first two things that happen to you, okay? And so that develops a charge, and that charge then comes down and affects every other decision that you make in this plane. It becomes your dance of life. By integrating your first primes through the process of deep PEAT, you discover your game of life, and you achieve a oneness, and you're able to then make a choice rather than have a reaction.
Oh, that's lovely. I know personally there are areas in my life where I would enjoy having more choice instead of sort of blindly responding to some sort of murky psychological script. So when I first started exploring PEAT, I saw it described as a processing method. That sparked my curiosity. So my question is, A, how is it a processing method? And there's something else about PEAT that really made me curious. I saw that it was compared to acupuncture, sort of acupuncture without the needles. And so, if you wouldn't mind, perhaps just talking a little bit about how PEAT is a processing method and perhaps how it's comparable to acupuncture.
It's not really comparable to acupuncture. Um, there are eye points that are used in deep PEAT that the inside eye point, which is the bladder meridian, you are eliminating charge, and the bladder does eliminate. So there would have to be a lot of research done to figure out the reasons that this works. It works. That's all I know. I don't know exactly why it works, and I don't think anybody except Zivorad, who has done this over and over and over, knows maybe why. He just experimented to find out that it did work. And
it's
how
still very young.
it happened, actually, you go back and forth between the eye points, all right? So you take a polarity. I'll share mine. Mine was my primes. The two pillars of your first charge are called prime polarities, and we can shorten that to calling them the primes. And so you go back and forth on your eye points, and until you take a problem, then you identify the primes in the person, and there's a whole series of steps that you go through when you're processing, and sometimes it just seems to take on a life of its own, and the person will reach their primes. Mine turned out to be freedom and restriction. And upon that playground, I saw the story of my life. And that is often what happens. You see, oh, that makes perfect sense, because these were my reactions. So it changed my life so profoundly that I remember sitting down, and I was cleaning house, and there was a picture in a magazine that had fallen open that normally would have triggered me, but I couldn't remember how. And I was so stunned that I remember just sitting down in the chair, because where that trigger might have been, there was buoyancy. And my life, I was free from that. I was free from that trigger. And that was not even something that I had consciously worked on. And this is what happens when those two primes integrate and the charge is gone. Then it's like dominoes fall, and all those things that you built after you built those first two charges fall like dominoes. And as you learn the other techniques, you learn how to take anything that has a charge and integrate it. What I see the brilliance that what Zivorad has done is that rather than just focusing on the good, as you would think would be helpful, he takes and has you focus deeply on that which was the trigger, or that which was painful, or that which was negative to you in your life, a hurtful experience. And then you focus on the good, and that's where you go back and forth on the eye point. And there are a series of steps, but what happens is that eventually those two things integrate, and they have no charge. And you're able to use them when you need to use them. So say you have anger and calm. there's a time for anger, there's a time for calm. But you have the choice to use that where it's appropriate.
Okay, so the primes then are the opposite ends of this, of whatever spectrum. I mean, it could, they're opposites of each other. For example, perhaps my primes are wastefulness with money versus thriftiness. And I might lean too far in the direction of one. And so, if I'm, please correct me if I'm misunderstanding here, but it seems to me like part of the therapy of this, part of the power of PEAT processing, is bringing these two opposites together and maybe making something, a third new thing out of these opposites, something that will reduce what you call the charge, which could be something, the charge would be something negative because
Well,
one
let me stop
side
you
of the
right there.
polarity is too
It's
heavy.
not a third new thing. It's a oneness. And Zivorad often quotes and says, what is the quote? Every fool knows there's a drop of water in the ocean, but it is the wise man who knows that in the drop of water is the ocean. So it's not just bad and it's not just good. It's all a part of the whole. It's all a part of the oneness. And it's the dance in the plane of duality. And you become free from the charge of banging around in it, and you're able to see it and use it. It's not that it goes away and your life becomes perfect, but there's a freedom, and there's a wisdom and a knowledge, and you're moving closer and closer to oneness every time you eliminate a charge in a polarity. So it doesn't become a third thing. That's what I wanted to say. It becomes one. His book that tells the most about this is Return to Oneness, and this is how you do that. You return to oneness by taking the two polarities and integrating them. It really makes me think of the infinity symbol moving all the time.
It's an ongoing process.
Yes.
So these polarities are the primes. The prime is a synonym for polarity, if I'm not mistaken.
The prime polarity are the first two pillars. Okay? After that, you're still going to have polarities or metapolarities, but when you integrate everyone will have their first set, because everybody gets triggered as they come into the plane of duality. So everybody's going to have their first set.
Okay.
And so you take that first set, and when you integrate those, then the ones below begin to just fall like dominoes. Doesn't mean that everything's gone, because we have many life experiences. What it does is enable us to see the dance of life. And that's what's fun.
Now, do you call it a dance in reference to this sort of constant movement between the poles in this balancing act, or this unification of two different things? Is this what you mean by the dance of life?
Well, every relationship is a dance. You know, when we meet someone and something triggers or something happens, we step back and go, now what was that? Mm-hmm. Now I'll step back and say, how am I reacting? Where is that? What is that? What does that remind me of? And then what polarity might that be? Has that made me angry? Has that made me happy? And so then you go with the dance, because I think the brilliance of this method is that it takes and has you feel that deep, deep, deep sadness, and then feel that deep, deep, deep joy. But it's the feeling of the sadness that finally releases and then integrates, because what you resist will persist. And that's what Zivorad understood. What you resist will persist. So part of this process is not resisting and not just falling into the joy, but integrating both of them.
How long does it, and I know there's no set time length, obviously, for everybody. This is probably, I'm assuming, a individual case will vary, but how long does it take the average beginning practitioner to start neutralizing the primes?
Generally, when it first started out, people would take, I remember going and going to an hour and a half session one day and an hour and a half session the next day. And now I have seen people in trainings that I've been to neutralize in 20 minutes. So anywhere from 20 minutes to 40 minutes on the average now.
Mm-hmm. Is this something that I need a partner to do with, or can I do it by myself?
Deep PEAT, you would need a processor.
Okay.
There are other methods where you can do them yourself. There are other techniques that Zivorad has developed that you can do as a spiritual practice yourself. So, but deep PEAT, you would need a trained processor for. And that was when I first got trained as a processor. That's really all I was interested in doing was the deep PEAT, because it had had such a profound effect on my life. And you know, now that I've really learned some of the other techniques and their value, and you know how they can be helpful, it can, you know, there are ways.
Right.
There's a process called Deep PEAT 4, and you know you can install qualities that you want. My colleague, who is one of the 5 trainers of trainers, they're 5 trainer of trainers. I am a certified PEAT processor, and I'm also a certified PEAT trainer, which means I can train a processor. The trainers are the people that train the trainers to train people to process. Okay, that's kind of the hierarchy of how that works. Okay, so my colleague, who is a trainer of trainers, has I've taken a 6-month course with her, and you know, learning how to do these things. And one of the things she did was she integrated a clean desk, and so she went online on YouTube and found exactly what she wanted her desk to look like. And so she integrated the quality of having a clean desk. And it helped her enormously. So, there are interesting ways of using it that are very practical and very useful in real life.
Yeah, my desk is always cluttered, or often cluttered, I should say.
Oh, well,
So
we just
that
won't go there, okay? I haven't gotten that far.
Well, you know, it seems that even though PEAT is very simple in this, in that we're trying to neutralize primes, it also seems sort of very developed. And I'd like to remind people listening that we're talking about a very young system as far as spiritual systems go. PEAT processing is quite young, so there's still a lot of research left, definitely. But I'd like to
Oh,
ask you, Pam, maybe a
absolutely.
little bit
There,
more
I
about
mean,
the
there some
organization
scholar
of the
needs to
PEAT
get hold
system,
of
and like
it,
perhaps
and
how many processes there might be in it.
yeah, um, there are. Oh, I haven't even stopped to count, to tell you the truth.
There are a
You
lot of
know,
them, aren't there?
because it's also a very fluid, moving. Um, you know, just like it used to take that long when I first was taken to my primes, and now it takes 20 to 40 minutes, and usually 20. Um, it's sort of like it was like, you know, the story of the 100th monkey, when the 100th monkey washed the potato then to wash off the dirt in the water, then all the monkeys everywhere knew how to do it. And all of
Right.
a sudden, as more people became processed, the quicker it went for everyone who was a processor. So it's been interesting to experience that. Um, I was first processed in my primes in 2005, and you know, Zivorad continues to tweak the different processes and find new ways to make them work even more efficiently. So it
Awesome.
really is an ongoing process, but there's an interesting story he tells of how he came to understand that you needed both. And to root out a problem, he was sitting in a park one day, and he saw the men trying to take this huge pole out of the ground. Well, they couldn't just lift it up because it was very deeply buried in the ground. So have you ever seen anybody take out a fence post?
I
They'll
have.
they'll take it to the right and they'll take it to the left, and they'll move it to the right and they'll move it to the left, and gradually it begins to loosen. And so that's how he just knew that this could also be done with rooting out our problems, our mental constructs, that you go to the right and then to the left, and you go to the right and then to the left, and gradually it loosens, and then it integrates. And
And
it was seeing a pole in a park, and this great gift came to us.
that's amazing. That is
It
truly
is,
amazing.
it is
Uh,
amazing.
Well, another very interesting notion I came across is the idea that PEAT, deep processing, can troubleshoot problems that may have been with you for a few lifetimes. Would you mind perhaps speaking a little bit about this notion of reincarnation? Does PEAT doctrine have some sort of a formal cosmology or explanation of the universe, for instance, or what's the take on things like that as far as PEAT processing is concerned?
Well, I wouldn't call it a doctrine, first of all. I'd call it, these are techniques of spiritual processing to take people, to return people to oneness. And yes, I would say that there are experiences of past lifetimes, that things do seem to resolve. I've been taught that they resolve, into future lifetimes. There've been, I have not experienced that in a group. Some people have. And I've always had a real hard time, honestly, to wrap my mind around parallel lifetimes. Um, but I have had experiences of brief flashes of past experiences, and so I do believe that if there are places where you are stuck, that have come from other times and other places,
Mm-hmm.
that can integrate.
Yes, because it is possible. I think. I mean, sometimes I'm like, oh wow, do I? Have I carried some of my own personal problems and kinks? Did these come to from another life, perhaps? And I just really am attracted to the idea that it's possible to troubleshoot long-running problems, perhaps even karmic problems of that sort. And it's really, even though it's only been around for maybe a couple decades or so, it's really a a very complicated or complex, not so complicated, but a complex system, and yet also at the same time fairly simple
Yes,
in using it.
that's the beauty
Um,
of it. It's very, it's simple and it's efficient. Um, it's the whole world at a grain of sand. I mean, it is. It's very, very. It has steps, and you do those steps, and as you do them and as you practice them, it can become. Um, it can become its own form of meditation. I know that my trainer, the trainer of trainers colleague, has been a long time meditator, and she says that it has helped her get to the place of meditation, quietness, um, more and more quickly as she has processed herself, her own self.
so she does it
Um,
without a partner. She's capable of processing herself now.
well, not to deep peat because she's already been to deep peat. But
Okay.
sure, you could you can do little processes with yourself. Um, yes, you sure
Are
can. And
these?
that and as a practice, it's just like mindfulness must become a practice. Um, or who are we to speak about it if we aren't doing the work ourselves? How can we send our clients home with homework? I mean, we must do our own homework and continually use the systems um, in order to help our clients.
Now, in Deep Pete, where you do have a partner in this, is it a situation where the processor is maybe asking you questions, for example, or that sort of, like, I don't want to say interrogate because that sounds harsh, and I'm sure it's not like, even though it might not be the most comfortable process, I'm sure it's not, intentionally harsh. So I don't want to use the word interrogate, but you see what I'm driving at is the processor. Is it a situation where he's asking you question or she is asking you questions, or what is that process like?
Well, I do experiential work with this, and I do experiential work with horses. And I probably couldn't tell you exactly how it works. I can talk about it, but truly, you do have to experience it um, to understand how powerful it is. Um, and the, one of the things I like about it very, very much is that it is not about the story. It is not about the story. It is about integrating polarities. And so you may start out with a problem, but that's only to get to the root polarity. Now, sometimes people don't get to their primes. Sometimes what they get to is a state of what's called pleroma. And that would be a state of feeling great oneness with everything, okay? And eventually they will get to their primes, but that may be what they needed that day in that particular situation. And that's okay. And that's, that's what I've had that happen in processing, where someone has gone to that state, and that's what they needed that day. And it's okay, I don't, whatever violin music I need to play that day, I play. And I like this process because it is not intrusive. I don't need to know anything about what their mother did. That's
Right.
not my job. I'm not a therapist. I am a PEAT processor. I am a spiritual person who is helping people on the spiritual path. And releasing these charges is one way that I can help. And when I was fortunate enough to go to a training when Zivorad was able to come to the United States in 2007, I remember that the very end of the training, and I was very young in this. I was still really having to get my mind wrapped around it, even though I knew it worked. And he sat on his chair and he said, "Now, you have something that can help people who are in pain in our world." And he said, "Remember that there are two kinds of karma. You all know the karma of commission, where you have done something that caused someone pain." And he said, "And you make amends for that." And he said, "But there's another kind of karma. There's the karma where you had something to give that you did not give, the karma of omission." And that really spoke to me, and that's why I became a processor, because it is something that can help remove the pain in the world, the charge in the world, and free people to make more aware decisions, to make choices rather than have reactions.
Very good. Pam, we're going to take a very quick break, a 1-minute break, everyone. We will be back in 1 minute. Do not go anywhere.
A new era in psychic services has begun. PsychicAccess.com. You can connect with our psychic advisors by telephone or chat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All of our psychic advisors are interviewed, fully verified, and accuracy tested, assuring you quality service. We're living in some very troubled times right now. More and more, the world's problems are affecting us on a personal level. You don't have to deal with this alone. Our highly accurate psychics, caring advisors, and talented mediums can help with situations you are currently experiencing and can let you know what the future may hold for you. All new customers get a free 6-minute reading. All you have to do is register. Why not visit us now and get a free reading at PsychicAccess.com.
Welcome back to the Psychic Viewpoint. I'm Stephen Lewis, and I'm here with Pam Salem, a certified PEAT processor in the spiritual technologies of Zivorad Slavinski. Now, Mrs. Salem, you mentioned Zivorad Slavinski. Is he, in fact, the origin of the PEAT processing system?
Yes, he is.
Ah. Would you mind perhaps telling us a little bit about the origins of PEAT? You mentioned how he was in the park and he saw the fence pole coming out of the ground. How did PEAT processing pick up in the West and in America, and how long has it been around?
Well, he created it in 1999, and then it has evolved as he's done trainings and seen how to do things, more efficiently as he's gone along. As he's seen and learned, just as we all do by practice and demonstration. And sometime in there is when he was in the park and realized it was the back and forth between the two polarities that worked to integrate them. And so that has just, things have grown out of that as people have done the different techniques. So I was trained in the deep PEAT and did some of the other processes, but until I worked with the trainer of trainers, I really didn't see, how deeply beneficial that they could be, and how wonderful to find a clean desk. But if there's a quality that you need to install in yourself, I had a friend who really needed to be more assertive, and so she went on YouTube and found, of all things, a video of Hillary Clinton and installed that quality, and she went back and she was able to handle a very aggressive person very assertively.
That's brilliant. I like that. So she was able to sort of borrow, for lack of a better word, I guess, the right amount of aggression
She was
to
able to
protect
borrow
herself.
the quality.
Ah, okay. And this would theoretically be possible for any area where you might have a deficiency of something required at the time.
In any area that you wanted to have that particular quality.
That's amazing.
If you didn't have that experience in your life, and you weren't normally that way, so you work on that piece and install that quality until you see, because once you integrate it, then you have the choice to use it when you need it because it's there.
Oh. Okay, so it's not like you're really reprogramming yourself. It's more like you're choosing to manifest certain behaviors or qualities as they're necessary. You don't
necessary, correctly. That's correct. As they're necessary.
That's
so it's very empowering and it's very freeing, and you're more aware in that particular situation of that particular dance.
So, now, I want to ask, and we're all people with very different types of talents and everything, and you're a very talented person. PEAT processing isn't your only area of expertise. You love horses as well and are quite experienced working with horses. And again, deep PEAT processing is something that is evolving, something that is being discovered through research, etc. Are you ever tempted to muse or wonder how it's possible perhaps to mix the two? Now, of course, I can imagine a horse itself, I don't know how capable it is of doing deep PEAT processing, but maybe as an adjunct or a help to PEAT therapy for someone else. I mean, it's a provocative idea, don't you think? Everybody loves horses.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Horses are like, big biofeedback machines because they're prey animals, and they're very astute. They even see the small movements of our faces, and
wow.
And they read that. They really read us amazingly. So probably where PEAT would be one of the most beneficial is in the actual equestrian world, where people are trying to achieve certain goals, and where, say, they have maybe had something to shake their confidence. There's a technique of removing trauma, which I have actually used on myself. And I had a horse almost fall with me, and so I took that and I integrated the charge, and my confidence came back again. So I was able to say, okay, that could have been dangerous, okay, but I am confident that I won't put myself in that position again. And so, and so I could move back and forth between the two without the charge. And I did that personally for myself. So I can see where PEAT could be beneficial to the human part of the partnership, because of how we think. Horses don't think like we think. I always tell my clients, horses are very, very much in the moment, which makes them great teachers. They're not going to go off into the corner and talk about what somebody is wearing that day.
They're worried about smelling rain in the air, or if there's a prey animal or
they're
a predator.
they're more worried about that somebody has, that there is a trash can where there was not a trash can and it might eat them. So they like the same thing, the same way every day, and their goal is to first to be safe and not be eaten, and secondly to eat. And and then they're very happy.
I can say the same for myself.
They're very uncomplicated on the Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Nice. Well, that might be why everybody loves horses. Well, I can't help but wonder, how PEAT processing could help me redefine my relationship to my animal, be it a horse or an unruly dog or something of that nature. I can't help but wonder. For a lot of us, my pets are important to me and everything. And I'm always faced with the challenge of, man, how can I communicate with Max or Gizmo more effectively? Am I really on the same level as these guys? And I'm thinking, wow, PEAT processing, on the surface of things, certainly could help revolutionize my relationship with the animal. What if, and this is speculation, what if the whispering phenomenon. It seems like every animal has a whisperer. There's a doggone cricket whisperer and a horse whisperer, a dog whisperer. There's a whisperer for everything. What if animal whispering is really some form of PEAT processing that helps you to sort of get on the communication level or the wavelength, for lack of a better word, as the animal in question? A lot of people would like to be able to do that with their pets, I think.
Yeah, well, if we're going to be talking about everything as oneness, at some level, we are at one. Mm-hmm. And so I think there are different levels of interaction with our pets.
Sure. They teach us a lot about ourselves.
And there's an archetypal level of communication with all species, just like happened with the plant species at Findhorn Garden. So at the archetypal level, there's the vast ability to be able to communicate.
Wow,
so we have to know what level we're communicating at. Is it the day by day? Is it the emotional? Is it the archetypal? What level are we communicating with our animals? Because silly me, I thought I was raising horses, and all the time the horses were teaching me about their language so that I could teach that to people and help them with their lives. I had no idea.
Well, one of the things I like about this this notion or this speculation is that the theory is that I would integrate myself with the animal. I mean, the basic polarity here is that of animal and human, or horse and human, and so using or adhering to the theory of the PEAT processing, I would become sort of like a spiritual lycanthropy, where I become sort of a centaur.
Okay, so here's how that would happen. There's a process called circular processing, okay? Right. So say that you have an issue with your brother. So in the circular processing, you would take it from your brother's point of view, okay? And you would process whatever the issue was from the brother's point of view. And I did this in practice once, and took it from my husband's point of view, and it was hysterical what came out of my mouth. Everybody laughed, but it sounded just exactly like him and what he would say. I laughed. I thought it was funny, and I have no idea where that came from. It's just that we've lived together a long time, but taking it from his point of view was very interesting.
Sure.
And so let's say we're going to do that with a pet, then you'd take it from the horse's point of view, or the dog's point of view, or the cat's point of view, and then you would process that issue. I know somebody that did that with dogs barking, and it was a situation where, ultimately from the dog's point of view, the person realized that the dog was, lonely all day.
You're right. Right.
And barking and barking. So taken from the dog's point of view, there was a realization in that circular processing.
I think one of the, and I'm speaking here as a layman, someone who's ignorant about PEAT processing, but it seems to me that there must be, for example, using your example of the barking dog, it seems to me like the benefit of PEAT processing is that it, all of a sudden I'm not angry anymore. I mean, it's great, sure, the benefits to relationship of being able to mind meld or see the world through your partner's eyes, those benefits are obvious. But I think what's important here is that as soon as I begin the PEAT processing and start seeing seeing life from the barking dog's point of view, I would imagine that takes away a lot of the physical effects of anger. That high adrenaline rush, the palsy, the trembling from the, you know what I'm saying? I think it would actually make a difference immediately.
Yeah. Sure it does. But by that same token, if you needed it, you could use that too.
I got to tell you, Mrs.
I mean, if
Salem,
the dog is coming over and pulling in your yard every day, then, you have that adrenaline rush, you need to shoo it away. And
right.
maybe even to speak to the owner about it. But you don't just go to la-la land. What you'd go to is the ability to dance between the opposites. Now, one thing I will say that Zivorad taught us in the training that I went to that I think is important is that there's a time not to use the PEAT, okay?
Right.
And it's important that you stay within your sphere of competence, okay? And that is where I say I am not a therapist. I don't deal with schizophrenics with this, and I would never assume to. And if someone came to a PEAT processor that was not a therapist and was depressed, or even to a therapist, Zivorad cautions against doing some of the PEAT processes because it will release the tension. Sometimes people are very deeply depressed and they're stuck in that. If you release that, they have just enough energy to do away with themselves if you're not monitoring them.
Understood.
And so that's where a professional is needed. And that would be the only time, you would want to have questions when the people come in. And usually, deeply depressive people go to therapists who are trained to handle this.
Sure.
I have never had anybody come in to me in a spiritual context, that I had that problem, but I would be very cautious if I did. And I would refer. So that's just, that is the only time that there would be a concern. For most of this, it's the releasing of problems in our lives and being able to move freely between anger and calm, or whatever polarity it is. I'll tell you a good place to search for those polarities is in, if you're familiar with David Hawkins' work, and he has all those different polarities. Judy's book, Power versus Force. Those are wonderful polarities to work with.
Well, you know, Pam, we're coming to the final portions of our interview tonight. Where would you direct people if they're curious about prime energy activation and transcendence? Where would you direct them on the web to find resources for information?
I would direct them to Zivorad's site, which is spiritual-technology.com.
Okay. That's a good place to start to find out more about this very...
And I would direct them, if they want to know more about it, to the link that I sent to you about the Return to Oneness book.
Very good. Very good. Well, everyone, Pam Salem, thank you so much, Mrs. Salem, for joining us tonight. It has been not only a pleasure, but also very enlightening. I've never heard of PEAT, and I'm very grateful that I have encountered it. I look forward to learning more about it over the years. And I just thank you very much for joining us here tonight, Pam.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Stephen. It's been a privilege. Thank you.
It has been an honor for me as well, Pam. You take good care, and we will talk to you some other day.
Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Stephen. You have a wonderful evening.
Oh, yes, ma'am. You as well. You as well. Well, you on the 4th.
Hello, my name is Res Miranda. If you're having relationship, career, or life issues, I'm inviting you to experience what it's like to have access to professional, highly accurate psychics and spiritual advisors you can trust to care and help you. Register now to get your free 6-minute reading by telephone or chat. Get answers, get access, psychic access, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. PsychicAccess.com.